Procházková and Elie Wiesel founded Forum 2000 for a purpose.
We have to use the past to not becoming our children's future.
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here, and I want to thank President Havel for convening another extraordinary gathering of Forum 2000.
So those people, they are please now think more seriously, and we should develop new ideas, and then important is implementation.
Dámy a pánové, vážení přítomní, já vás co nejsrdečněji vítám na konferenci Forum 2000.
The world is upside down. How should we put it back together? Are we able to act responsibly? Can we work together, play by the rules, and restore solidarity? Let's use this crisis as an opportunity. A new world emerging? Watch the online Forum 2000 conference, October 12th to 14th.
So, good day to our dear speakers and online participants. I would like to welcome you to our debate called China, a Human Rights Conundrum, organized by Forum 2000. Before we start, let me introduce our speakers. Firstly, I would like to warmly welcome His Excellency Lobsang Sangay, Sikyong, or Prime Minister of the Tibetan Government in Exile. Your Excellency, welcome. Our second speaker is Nuri Turkel, who is a lawyer and Uyghur rights advocate. He is currently an attorney and chairman of the board for the Uyghur Human Rights Project. He also served as the president of the Uyghur American Association and as a legal and policy advisor to the presidents of the World Uyghur Congress. Mr. Turkel, welcome as well.
Thank you.
And our third speaker, Mrs. Ting Loretta, an artist and activist. She worked as a visual arts teacher in Hong Kong. She was witnessing big changes since the handover to China. In 2018, Loretta established herself in Prague as a political performance artist. Her first and well-known performance was in June 2019, entitled Letter to My People. It was presented in the Center for Contemporary Art in Prague. And this exhibition pays tribute to Liu Xiaobo, the only Chinese Nobel Peace Prize winner. Loretta, welcome as well.
Hello.
So let me also introduce myself. My name is Kateřina Procházková. I'm a journalist, former Asia correspondent for Czech Radio and Czech TV, now working for the project Synopsis, based here in Prague. So we have an excellent lineup and heavy topic to tackle. So without further ado, I would like to ask our speakers for 5 minutes remarks or presentations. And probably I would like, firstly, Your Excellency, if you could start. Please, floor is yours.
Oh, thank you for the privilege and honor to be with panelists and for the kind introduction. But we should remember that we are having this virtual Forum 2000 because of the pandemic, the Wuhan virus, which originated in China. And it has cost the world a lot. I think $9 to $10 trillion, worth of economy has, declined, which is almost half the GDP of Europe. So the world has paid a huge price because the Chinese government did not share the information 3 to 6 weeks when the Wuhan virus happened. And they clearly knew how dangerous it was. So again, we are talking about human rights. Lack of human rights in China made the world pay a huge price, even in economic and social terms. Just a few weeks ago, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, either we change China or China will change you. I said exactly the same thing 2 years ago at Geneva Forum and at Forum 2000. Either we transform China or China will transform you, right? Now, so today we are having this panel discussion on human rights in China. But rather, I've been traveling to many of the European countries, and I've always been saying, I've come to speak to you to say, not to support Tibet and save Tibet, but to save Europe, because what China is doing is impacting and influencing Europe and the whole world. Let's take an example. A few days ago, Nobel Peace Committee awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to UN World Food Program, which is a laudable organization which saves and provides food for 130 million people, which is a good thing. But this year, the Nobel Peace Prize should have gone to Hong Kong democracy activists. They suffer a lot, or even Uyghur people, right? But the Nobel Peace Committee did not give Nobel Peace Prize to people in Hong Kong or to Uyghur people. Why? Because Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, went to Norway in Oslo in late August and warned the Norwegian government to don't make the same mistake that they made a decade ago by giving the Nobel Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo, right? Now, so already the Chinese government is not only violating human rights of people, Uyghur people, Tibetans, and Hong Kong, and Mongolians, but they are already impacting the world and how world should behave, including Norway and Nobel Peace Committee. So this is unfortunate. Now, what China is also doing, they are restructuring and influencing United Nations. Of the 15 agencies, they have key people. Of the 15 agencies, 4 or 5, the main boss, the secretary generals, are Chinese officials. In the remaining 10 or so, they are either under or assistant under secretary general, and so on and so forth. Already, they are in the United Nations agencies. Now, what do they do? For example, they are in charge of civil aviation, one of the UN agency. Now, why Taiwan is moved from the map of the civil agency by all these airlines is because the UN Agency of Civil Aviation put pressure on airlines to remove the map. And who is the guy? A Chinese guy. So similarly, they are at UNESCO. They make youth leadership training sing a song in praise of Belt and Road Initiative. So we should be aware that the tentacles of the Communist Party of China have already penetrated global organizations, now including Liu Xiaobo Nobel Peace Prize, right? The foreign minister at that time, who finally agreed to renew diplomatic relationship with China, where is he now? He is the president of World Economic Forum. He's in charge of Davos. So, Chinese government tentacles are everywhere, and that's how they violate human rights. That's why they get away with violating, human rights of Tibetan people, and Uyghurs and Mongolians and people in Hong Kong. Now, finally, the same author, Adrian Zen, who came out with this expose of 1 million Uyghur brothers and sisters in concentration camps, has come out with a report of 500,000 Tibetans in similar concentration camps in Tibet. Now, how many people, how many news media covered it? Reuters did investigation and confirmed that Adrian Zen, the expose on Tibet also, of Tibetan youth, being uprooted from nomadic and farming areas and brought to urban setting, and like Uyghur brothers and sisters put in concentration camps where they are given training, right? Now, this is done in the name of poverty elevation. So, if you look at European Union leaders and many leaders around the world, they praise poverty alleviation program of China. But they overlook the fact that poverty alleviation for Uyghur brothers and sisters, the Mongolians and Tibetans, means they are taken to concentration camps, uprooted from their family, their culture, their, their neighbors and friends, and they are put in a military drill-like system. So they are essentially Sinicized, made Chinese, right? And after a year or 2 or 3 of spending time in these concentration camps, do they get jobs? Do they get employment? They don't. They are uprooted from their, cultural setting, their traditional livelihood, and they're given quote-unquote skills, and they're thrown out in the streets. So human rights of the Tibetan people are violated. Now, finally, let me end with this. Even though this has been taking place for the last 60 years, the Chinese government act with impunity till the expose of Uyghur brothers and sisters and the recent case of Tibet. Why? Because the European leaders and others praise poverty alleviation program of the Chinese government. They pay more attention to, and they want to maintain relationship with China because of economic and business. And Chinese government, they think they can get away with it, and they do. So that's why they go to Oslo and warn Norwegian people and Norway government, including Nobel Peace Committee, not to give Nobel Peace Prize to people in Hong Kong or people in East Turkestan, right? So this is the price we are paying. So, like Mike Pompeo said, I said this since 2018, either you transform China or China will transform you. So that's the choice we have. So today's panel discussion is as much about saving Tibetan people and Uyghurs and people in Hong Kong and Mongolians. It's more about saving yourself, saving this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Now I would like to ask the second speaker for his opinion. Please, Mr. Turkel, our online floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this important conversation. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to Sikyong, Lobsang Sangay, and Margaret for their contribution to today's conversation. I'm representing the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USERF. We are glad to be part of this important conference. It is truly an honor to join you all. When I accepted your invitation, I noticed that one of the Forum 2000's co-founders was Elie Wiesel, the Romanian Holocaust survivor. Unfortunately, I have found myself thinking a lot about the Holocaust recently. It is the only adequate point of comparison for what is happening to the Uyghur people. While the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghur Muslims is not the same as Nazi Germany's persecution of the Jewish people, the similarities are horrifying. The Chinese government has detained millions of Uyghurs. While we don't know the exact number, it is clearly the largest internment of an ethno-national, ethno-religious group since World War II. Chinese authorities have forced tens of thousands of Uyghurs to work in textile and electronics factories, in some cases for companies that supply large and international brands. There are reports that some of the same German companies that benefited from Jewish forced labor 75 years ago now benefiting from Uyghur forced labor. According to the experts, Chinese doctors have forcibly sterilized thousands of Uyghur women, leading birth rates in the Uyghur region, East Turkestan, to plummet 24% last year. These measures to limit the population of ethnic group could very well constitute a genocide under the international law. USERF urges the United States government, the State Department particularly, to officially call it straight out as genocide. Obviously, the Holocaust looms large over our moral imagination, so I don't invoke this comparison lightly. The horrors of the Holocaust birthed the modern international human rights movement. While the world has not always lived up to its promises to never again permit such mass atrocities, we have numerous human rights treaties, bodies that have helped to protect the rights of millions, including the Uyghurs, Tibetans, and Mongolians, and people of Hong Kong. That is no small part due to the fact of the Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel's advocacy personified the power of the stories and storytelling. His books, particularly the well-known one, Night, educated generations of readers about the Holocaust. He later worked to help establish the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, where each year millions of visitors learn the stories of the men and women who perished in the concentration camps. Wiesel's brutal honesty and sparse prose conveyed more about the tragedies of Auschwitz and Buchenwald than statistics and history textbooks. Every year after first reading the book Night, I can still remember Wiesel's pained meditations about religion and human rights and human nature. This is why Holocaust still haunts us to this day, and why appropriate and thoughtful comparison to the Holocaust can still inspire actions. We need that action today on behalf of the Uyghur people, Tibetans, and others suffered under the Communist Party in China. We need the powerful storytelling of wordsmith of Wiesel, caliber to alert the world. Unfortunately, our most visible stories have not risen to this challenge. Many of you have probably heard about the new Mulan remake on Disney's streamlining services. In the credit, Disney thanked the Communist Party's propaganda commission in the Xinjiang region. Some scenes were filmed in the ancient city of Turpan. According to the Radio Free Asia, as many as 8 concentration camps holding thousands of Uyghurs were operating not far from the actors and producers' production crew stood. To say that I'm disappointed would be an understatement. But Disney is not the only Hollywood studio afraid to risk the Chinese government's wrath and jeopardize access to the giant Chinese market. I'm sure that some studio executives tell themselves that in refusing to comment, they're choosing to remain neutral. But as Elie Wiesel said, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Fortunately, we have a government in the United States that has been vocal in voicing its support for the Uyghur people. Both members of Congress and the Trump administration have backed up their words with action by passing and enforcing new laws designed to sanction Chinese officials responsible for these abuses. Even American business leaders are waking up to this blight of forced labor and taking a closer look at their supply chains in China. It is time for American storytellers and our entertainment companies to speak truthfully and directly about the central moral challenges of our time. Night was published in 1960, 15 years after American troops liberated Buchenwald. The Uyghur people cannot wait that long for a story to be told. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Turkel. And now I would give the floor to Loretta. So Loretta, please.
Yeah, thank you. This is my honor to be here with CGYung of CTA, Dr. Lobsang Sangay, and Commissioner of US CIRF, Mr. Nuri Turkel. Since June 2019, my homeland, Hong Kong, has been undergoing a tremendous human rights crisis and falling into an organized genocide plan. We can see that the trajectory of China is rapidly trampling upon the Hong Kong Basic Law and one country, two systems. China aims to ruin the rule of law in Hong Kong. Since last year, after the complete failure of the extradition law attempt, they recklessly imposed the national security law upon our reliable law foundation on the 1st of July. We can see how regardless of China and the Hong Kong government to the universal human rights principle. China intends to destroy Hong Kongers. Apart from Han descent, we have profound difference of cultural identity, language, social attitude, and value. Last year, we have witnessed numbers of Hong Kongers were allegedly murdered without acknowledgement or further investigations. Countless protesters were seriously injured by unnecessary police brutality, and many youngsters were arrested from the street for no reason, even during the peaceful protests. Since the movement began, we have lost count of number of cases that show a drastic violation of human rights. Hereby, I would like to share some recent cases for the audience to have a clear picture of what had happened, and it is still ongoing. Due to a homework discussions about the freedom of speech and Hong Kong independence, an elementary school teacher was disqualified by the government. 12 Hong Kong youths were detained under China police custody because of illegal border crossing to Taiwan from Hong Kong, and it has been over 50 days already without further updates. Over 86 citizens were arrested on the China National Day due to the suspicions of violations of national security law, who might be the first group of people sentenced for lifelong imprisonment. On the other side, the Hong Kong government has honored 94 police officers who are responsible for the crackdown of the pro-democracy protests. The picture is crystal clear. The Chinese Communist Party is interfering the internal affair with the so-called high autonomy in Hong Kong in every aspect, including legislation, administration, implementation, education, social value, ideology, and so on. Essentially, most of the Hong Kongers, as I know, we never asked to be an independent country. Yet, China keeps spreading its conspiracy behind their walls to their people in order to isolate our voice between Hong Kongers and Chinese. We were too comfortable to cooperate with China under the 50 years framework. People just want to live in stability and prosperity. We can notice more voices stand and talk about Hong Kong independence, definitely after witness of Chinese ridiculously brutal behavior. This is seemingly a usual measurement of Chinese Communist Party to oppress the minority. They keep pushing our bottom line, trying to change our fundamental value. They won't stop attempting to stigmatize the democratic demand in order to accomplish their desire. They label the protester as terrorists, enlarge the echo of secession, create hatred and mass panic along foul charts to oppress Hong Kongers. And they have already done the same to Tibetan and Uyghurs. China's human rights problem is not just a domestic problem, but a universal affair. We can see the international world is awakening from the China dream days ago. On the 6th of October, Germany leads statements in the United Nations, with almost 40 countries expressing grave concern and condemning China abuse human rights in East Turkestan, Tibet, and Hong Kong. It is all started by an unreliable promise that lead Hong Kong to the recent situation. A powerful and untrustworthy regime is influencing the world. We missed the time while Tibet was suppressed by the CCP in 1959, as well as the moment while East Turkestan was oppressed in 1989. If we stay ignorant and overlook this opportunity to save Hong Kong, to free the people from Tibet and East Turkestan, to keep our eyes on Taiwan and Inner Mongolia, other 30 years later, if you think about what you have done in 2020, you would only sigh and wonder why you were not involved enough. It goes without saying that we need your help and awareness before it is too late. It is the time to stand with the people who were suffered in the past, who are suffering right now, and who is going to be the next. We can stand together and hold China accountable, or we can choose to become the next victim. Thank you.
Loretta, thank you very much. We have still approximately 30 minutes for questions. So let me start with mine, and then maybe we'll follow up with the chat ones, or we will see. So my first question is to His Excellency Lobsang Sangay, and it's about the COVID time. You mentioned the COVID time, so I would like to ask is the Chinese influence abroad and the human rights violation on minorities that PRC at home likely to strengthen in the post-pandemic world or not? What is your opinion, please?
Yeah, if the world continues as business as usual, then yes, I think the Chinese government hand will only be strengthened, and human rights violations of quote-unquote minorities will continue. Because there are many countries who support China. For example, at the Human Rights Council, Chinese government has tried and have succeeded to redefine human rights. They have passed 2 resolutions. Food over freedom, development over democracy. And majority of the members of the Human Rights Council voted with the Chinese government. Now, Chinese government, they want to make it into a statutory, right? And the Russian expert-led committee has endorsed that as well. So if it actually becomes the real definition of human rights, then yes, Chinese government can act with impunity in the name of poverty elevation. What people, what's happening with Uyghur people and Tibetans, so they can get away with it. Having said that, there is an opportunity now. The recent Pew Research survey had come out with a report that the trust deficit against China is very high. So many people in the world are not trusting. I think 24 or so European mainly and North America, and Australia, and I think Japan was included in the survey. Now 75 to 80 to 84% of the population in these 24 democratic countries do not trust Chinese government and Chinese leadership. So this is an opportunity. We have been saying for the last 60 years, if you truly want to understand China, you must know what is going on in Tibet, what happened in Tibet, what's happening in Tibet. People ignored us. Now the whole world is paying the price with this pandemic. It's a lack of transparency, lack of democracy, lack of human rights in China, which led to this pandemic, the information not being shared, and the whole world is paying the price. So similarly, they are trying to control United Nations, redefine human rights. If they get away with it, and they will, their hand will be strengthened. So there are countries which are, who are supporting Chinese government. So we all should be vigilant. So this is the time to come out in the street, come out openly from this bilateral closed door discussion on human rights. It's over. Now they should come out, and the government should demand reciprocity. If Wang Yi comes to Europe, Foreign Minister of Czech Republic should demand to go to Tibet and go to East Turkestan and go to Hong Kong. So this kind of reciprocity has to be demanded. Now, hence action is needed. So we have to magnify the voices of Tibetans and Uyghurs and people in Hong Kong, definitely.
Thank you very much. I would just add that our head of Senate recently visited Taiwan, and you probably heard about the reaction from the Chinese side. Mr. Turkel, would you add something to? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I agree with everything that Sikyon said. You know, three of us sitting in this panel can easily say, "We told you so" to the world. It's quite easy. As my brother Lobsang Sangay said, we've been telling the world, and we reminded the world that something is coming to them, and we've been ignored. Whatever is happening today around the world is something that we can easily say we've seen this movie before. Tibet and East Turkestan were fooled with this fake autonomy. You know, when you look at the actual text, it looks and reads very reasonably. And they did the same thing with Hong Kong. They reshuffle, recycle leadership. They test each other's homeland as a testing run. An example of this Chinese Adolf Eichmann that people have been correctly calling Chen Zhenguo was in Tibet. He tested certain visits, surveillance. It worked. Mass detention worked. Religious persecution worked for him, and he got promoted, and he started this modern-day genocide. And similarly, he tested out this legislation called, a local legislation called de-extremification measure, and the world ignored. And it was so draconian. The 48 behaviors listed in Foreign Policy magazine include something like growing beard for style. And then with that kind of legitimization, the world ignored again, and they come up with national security law in Hong Kong. So this is like, you know, it's coming kind of almost like endless a testing of international community's resolute and conscience. And it's just mind-boggling that some countries mistakenly believe that China handled this global health crisis properly. Actually, the opposite. Had they been transparent, had they been implemented good governance, had they allowed the international health expert to get access, we were not having this problem. We're losing about 1,500 people every day in the United States. The numbers are adding up. Everybody's life is interrupted. And the international community has to wake up this brutality. And I like to end by saying this, reminding this. Even the PPEs, the personal protective equipment, been sent around the world, made by modern-day slaves named Uyghurs. Think about that. Think about that. This is where we are.
Thank you. Loretta, maybe do you want to add
Yeah, I
something
really
as well?
agree. Yeah, I really agree. Both of the president. Like, I really want to share one very personal perspective as a Hong Konger. I was living in Hong Kong for 30 years, and to be honest, that Hong Kongers has been always like don't care about politics that much, because we were talking about that Hong Kong as a international financial center, and we heard about the thing in East Turkestan. We heard about Tibet. What I want to say is, I think as a Hong Konger, that we actually, for that, we're part of the Western history, with the Western culture. And the thing is about, we always lack of empathy. We thought that it's far away from us. It's not going to happen in our land. And when it's once happened and it's just come in 1 year, definitely everything's changed. And when I went back to Hong Kong last January, and then when I see what is happening there, I couldn't believe in my eyes, because I was in Prague for only 2 years, and I thought Hong Kong will be fine, like as always. But actually, the change can be profound. And what I want to tell the Western world, the people, is please be compassionate. And you have to know that something is going to happen one day also, not just to us, maybe also to you.
Loretta, thank you. My second question, it's about exporting the China model of approach to human rights. So I would like to ask maybe first Mr. Turkel, how much is Beijing actually interested in exporting its China model of approach to human rights? It was mentioned that they proclaim that economic rights are above human rights and laws. So what do you think? Are they going to continue with this narrative, and is going to the rest of the world listen and follow this? Thank you.
I'd like to start by saying that whatever is happening in East Turkestan, Tibet, and Hong Kong are not about no longer a local issue. This is going to affect everybody's life for the following reason. Number one, China is exporting its repressive model. If you look at the way that they have divided the international community with 3 C's: corrosive, corrupt, coercive influence campaign, buying out silence, promoting their way of repressing political dissent, monitoring people's political activities. Europe, Central Eastern Europe is particularly vulnerable, is one thing that need to be talked about almost every day. And the other thing that has not been appreciated and discussed enough is this digital authoritarianism, that also the countries around the world are very vulnerable. Hong Kong, Tibet, East Turkestan have been effectively used as a laboratory for surveillance, facial recognition, voice recognition, compulsory installment of monitoring apps on the phones, smartphones. And the Chinese government has been actively promoting this surveillance technology around the world. When I spoke at Oslo Freedom Forum last May, I listed 36 countries based on New York Times reporting. About a month ago, my commission held a hearing. One of our experts told us that 83 countries currently have adopted China's digital authoritarianism. So this promotion of 5G actually comes with a huge price. We're speaking at a European country organized conference. I call on the European countries, particularly the countries that have experience with communism, fascism, Nazi Germany, to be very mindful. Cloud-powered, AI-powered, modern-day Stasi is coming to you. So it needs to be discussed. And also, not only there, it's not stopping there. The China is also promoting so-called Chinese judicial model based on the information that we have been obtained and some of the investigative reporting published in credible newspapers. They're also training police forces, law enforcement, and the judges in certain countries, namely like New Zealand police. What do they do in China? New Zealand police reportedly being trained by the Chinese police. The Turkish judges reportedly being trained by Chinese quote-unquote judges. So these are disturbing, very challenging trends that the international community could pay attention to. Martin Niemöller's famous phrases have been invoked many times. When you continue to feel indifferent, when they come to you, no one will be speaking for you.
Thank you. I have one more question, maybe to His Excellency. Some experts are saying that the PRC still lacks this discourse power, the ability to be superpower in terms of intellectual power. Do you think that this is so important for Beijing and for other PRC or China following countries? Do you think they?
Well,
please.
Yeah, I think the Washington Consensus was the norm, followed by international community and business and everything. So after the 2008 financial crisis, a serious alternative was proposed, which is called Beijing Consensus, which is the Chinese government's model of, having a one-party totalitarian control system which denies political rights, but there is economic growth and poverty elevation. So Beijing Consensus was discussed in the mainstream. I think major news media, television, discussed it. Many think tanks wrote about it. So, the intellectual capacity or discourse that China can bring, it's underestimated. I think once they do that, the Beijing Consensus was proposed as an alternative to replace the Washington Consensus. And also, you should understand that China experts, we call sinologists, 90% of the sinologists are sympathetic towards, or they lean towards, or speak for the Chinese government or the Beijing Consensus, things like that, primarily because, if you look at the Soviet experts, 90% spoke against Soviet Union and the communist or the one-party system of Soviet Union. But it's just the opposite, mainly because now there are many sinologists who are pro-democracy, pro-human rights. But once they speak out, like Andrew Nathan and others, their visas are denied. They're banned going to China. So once you're a China expert, if you cannot visit China, then your expertise is questioned. Right? So the Chinese government use visa as a leverage, as a tool to blackmail sinologists. And many are given, shares in businesses, right? And many are given, funds for their projects. So this is how they influence. So intellectual discourse or capacity can be bought or coerced. So, it's very important to know that what the Chinese government is capable of. So not just the, even as my friend mentioned about digital authoritarianism or digital surveillance, right? Again, this is facilitated by United Nations, telecommunication agency. Now, who sits there? A Chinese official sits there, right? So the 5G, all these things, again, are promoted. Chinese-related 5Gs are promoted and facilitated by UN agency because Chinese government official sits there as the Secretary General or the Assistant Secretary General, So the reach of the Chinese government, we should not underestimate, including the intellectual capacity. So we should be very, very vigilant.
Thank you for that, and thank you very much for that remark about the sinologist. I have to say that we in the synopsis are not among the 90%, but you're right. Yes. So maybe Mr. Turkel, can you react to that question as well, please?
Yes, it is. It's not. I cannot say that it's us against them, but the threat, the people in various capitals, particularly in Washington, have been discussing this China threat concept. This is not overstated. Early on, when the United States, under the United States leadership, when the Chinese were brought into the international system, particularly the economic system, the wishful thinking was that, well, they will become one of us one day. We will be dancing in Tiananmen Square, cherishing the democratic norms that they establish. I think people should be having a buyer's remorse today. And I can sense that someone being in Washington and having both private and public conversations about these issues. The consensus, especially on the United States Capitol, Congress, is that this is a real threat. This is a real challenge. This is a national security threat. This is a challenge to our democratic norms. This is a challenge to privacy. This is a challenge to civil rights. And also this is a moral challenge because they're bringing back things like cotton trade that the United States is very regretful about. They're bringing people, making people to talk about what happened to never again, all over again. They're talking about concentration camps. I personally thought that we were done with it. I was born in re-education at the height of the Cultural Revolution. My dad was in a labor camp. I was in a re-education camp with my mother. I didn't even talk about it until 3 years ago. I thought that we don't have to talk about these things. Who's bringing this back? China. Who's ignoring the rule of law in Hong Kong? China. Who's challenging the international rules-based system? China. Who's spreading authoritarianism? China. Who's buying out silence? China. This everything. Who's causing health? Who has been? Which country has been the main source of today's global healthcare crisis? China. So the people rightfully, public opinion recently gathered by Pew Research shows that vast majority of the people around the world, not only in the United States, we're talking about over 80% negative opinion in China. So it is incumbent upon people who has power, who sits in the government, policymakers, lawmakers, diplomats, to not only do gut checking, revisit some of their past policies that brought us a miserable failure.
Thank you for that. I have one question maybe to all of you. I know our time is running. So what should the West do? How the West should react to the genocide in Xinjiang, violation of human rights in Tibet, in Inner Mongolia, or in Hong Kong? Impose economic sanctions, and does any action targeting the regime, the CCP, doesn't make the Chinese people suffer first and foremost, and also give a powerful tool to the Chinese regime and its propaganda? Like, in other words, say the West is bad, let's show our strength, let's unify under the red flag or something. So what we as a West should do, how we can help? Maybe Loretta, can you start, please?
Yeah, what I want to say is not to underestimate of yourself, because everybody counts. A lot of people might think that is what we can do is only too small. But actually, if all of us have compassion, have empathy, and then we do something, we try to use what we know and tell the other people, that actually really help the whole movement go on, but not just staying at home, seeing that happen and not helping for anything. For the Western people, actually, every people also counts. Like, as you say, the sanction that might happen, like economic collapse in Hong Kong, that we all count already. All the Hong Kong people know that. And we know that what we are fighting for. And please, the whole world can help and everyone could do something.
Okay, thank you. Excellency, please, could you add something? Or give us advice?
Every morning the Chinese leaders, wake up. They don't read Xinhua News Agency and watch CCTV. They know pretty much a day before what are the headlines going to be. But they watch CNN and they read New York Times and Washington Post and BBC. You see, so they care what the rest of the world say or do, right? So more people speak out about human rights, then more Chinese people and the government will listen to. Now, there is offensive way to do it and defensive way to do it. Offensively, yes. Blanket economic sanctions, I don't think so. But targeted economic sanctions, yes. Now, CNN has come out with the news that what they call black gold about the hair, right, which are manufactured in Xinjiang, are exported to America and European countries, and and they're bought, right? So similarly, there are companies which are involved in gold mining, let's say, or copper mining in Tibet. So these companies should be made accountable. And so we all know about the Marriott Hotel, right? One employee posted a quote of His Holiness Dalai Lama or Tibet on his Facebook or social media profile, and the Chinese government demanded that code be pulled out, and the head of the Marriott Hotel had to apologize to the Chinese government. I mean, can you imagine someone in Western country, right? An employee of Marriott Hotel is posting something, and then head of the Marriott company should go and apologize to the Chinese government. So this kind of behavior should not be tolerated. So hence targeted sanctions and actions are needed. But more importantly, defensively, right? For example, they use elite co-optation. So this is what they did in Tibet, this is what they did in East Turkestan, they're doing in Hong Kong, and they're trying to do it in Taiwan as well. We should not forget the people in Taiwan. How they either corrupt or coerce a politician to speak for the Chinese government. How the business people are made to invest in China, or they get in Chinese investment and influence them. How intellectuals, as I already said, sinologists are, visa is even used, and even they were given stocks and investment as well. Journalists, right? How they are taken to China and given this red carpet entertainment and guided tour, and they all come back with the same headlines. China has improved human rights conditions of Chinese people. Poverty alleviation program is going on very good. So this elite co-optation that's taking place in your own country, that you should be very much aware of, right? These are the things you can do. And finally, I already said this, bilateral dialogue on human rights between Chinese foreign ministry officials and the foreign ministry officials of all the countries, including European countries, is bygone. It's useless. It doesn't help. Rather, foreign ministry should issue statements. The parliament should discuss human rights conditions of Tibetan people and other people in China openly. And a few days ago, UK Parliament did that. A few days ago, German Bundestag did that, and also US Congress. Similarly, there has to be a coordination, coalition of countries doing same thing at the same time. This is how you can push back the Chinese government. So, even the Chinese people are looking up to the world and international community, whether they will stand up for human rights of not just Tibetan people, including Han Chinese people also. More you speak up for them, more they will be emboldened, and more they will be in the streets. So silence is complicit. First thing, we can begin with speaking out for human rights in China.
Thank you. Mr. Turkel, please.
I concur with my colleagues about those wonderful suggestions as to what international community should do. One of the I'd like to add a few more. One is the recognition. Recognition is almost as important as taking a real action. I mean, that follows, that results in action. So recognizing what is happening as a genocide, as a expansionism, threat to democracy, threat to national security, threat to human values, and also a promotion of racism, the kind of recognition need to be made all around the world. And also, Lobsang Sangay mentioned the business community briefly. When you deal with the issues like this, the Hong Kong, East Turkestan, now the Mongolia, Inner Mongolia, Taiwan, and Tibet, you reasonably expect luminaries around the world, business leaders, the Hollywood elites to speak, right? I can't find anyone. There's only a handful of people, maybe a few, have spoken out and paid the ultimate price. We should go out and not only encourage them, but also protect them. China has been kicking out journalists out of China, denying renewal of their credentials, threatening China experts with the visa restrictions, threatening the business community, the Hollywood studios with access to Chinese market. Our governments, the democratic governments, should provide them means and ways to protect their business interest. So, I make a living by doing compliance work. I always tell my clients and people that I represent, that we should export our good corporate practices, good corporate practice to the other countries, not bring them to home. So that kind of approach could be very helpful. We're talking about forced labor, the modern day slavery. 13 tons of Uyghur women's hair was seized and also cited in the CNN piece, the chilling piece that the Sikyong was citing. How many women's hair would make up 13 tons of hair? That was only one shipment. The hair is the most visible sign of beauty for any woman, not only for the Uyghur woman. So this is also a similar type of standard for the Tibetan movement. Are we going to start seeing Tibetan women's hair to be sold around the world? Are you looking for dark brown, light brown, black hair in the stores for, improve your beauty? Are you going to use Uyghur women and Tibetan women's hair in the future? These kind of gut checking, need to be done in the citizens level. If you put pressure on the corporate global brand, we talk about more than 80 brands. All of the things that we touch, believed to be produced by Uyghur slaves. I'll give you a stat that you will know that this is a serious problem. From April 2019 through 2020, the same year, 1 year period, the exports from the forced labor camps or Xinjiang-based products coming to the United States increased by 250% and almost 200% to Italy. If you go to USCIS website, there's a fact sheet that you can find information. So this is happening as we speak. So the citizens consumers have a huge responsibilities. Next time when you touch a cotton product made in China, the chance of that being made by Uyghur slaves are very, very good, very high. At the end of the day, when you look at it, 80% of the made in China cotton products were sourced in East Turkestan. More than 20% of the cotton product export from China to the world sourced in East Turkestan. So that can easily be a tackled issue by consumers through citizens' activism. And also, I cannot be more grateful to the United States government for the unprecedented historic policy and legislative responses coming out of Washington in attempts to address the atrocities in Tibet, in East Turkestan, also the political repression in Hong Kong. We've seen legislations, we've seen powerful statements. US politicians talk day in, day out, almost every day about these issues. They're like one of the main issues in the China talking points. The other countries, instead of criticizing the United States, we should be focusing on the countries not doing anything. This is not about some administration or a president trying to use these issues for the benefit of trade negotiation. Let me highlight this. Religious freedom is the first human rights for the American people. It's in the Declaration of Independence. It's not about, when the United States talk about human rights and religious freedom, it's not about some geopolitical interest-centric statement. United States government, American people believe the religious freedom, religious persecution is the precursor for genocide. It's a crime against humanity. So instead of criticizing the policy initiatives coming out of China, the United States toward China, the other countries should join effort, just like the way that it did a few days ago at the UN. 40 countries came out criticizing Chinese concentration camps and demanding unfettered access. So global response, collaborated, concerted, is something absolutely necessary. United States government cannot tackle this alone. Targeted economic sanction, recognition, consumer reaction are the things that can force the Chinese government to change its behavior.
Thank you very much for that. I'm sorry, I think our time has run out, so let me summarize a bit our debate. Firstly, it was said here that we are here online today because of COVID-19, the pandemic that was caused by PRC or in China, or developed in China. So important thing now, how His Excellency Lobsang Sangay say, either we will transform PRC or they will change us. And this is important message, not just for Uyghur people, Tibetan people, Hong Kongers, but it's for the whole world, for the whole Europe and world. Mrs. Loretta Lau said, China is trying to kill Hong Kongers. The CCP is influencing Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is not a. Hong Kong doesn't have just its own problem. This is a universal problem. What is happening right now? I would like also thank Mr. Turkel, who mentioned the situation in Xinjiang and compared the situation with the situation during the Second World War, during the Nazi rule in Europe, and how he pointed out we shouldn't be silent. It's time to speak out. It's time to speak out, and it's time to start cooperate, and cooperation and coordination is important. So thank you very much to all of you, these three important voices who are willing to speak out and sharing their opinions. Thank you very much to our listeners, and I hope that next time we will not meet just online, but we could meet face to face and see each other. So once more, thank you very much and have a nice evening or day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.